Going to do something a little bit different today. The strikers are still in focus, but I've asked for your thoughts and your predictions on what will happen between now and the transfer deadline. Will Isak go? Will Strand Larsen or Wissa or both join? We're discussing all of that with updates and my opinions as well. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome back to another video. Please do hit subscribe and like if you haven't already. Join the community. Looking to get towards 2,000 subscribers. I never thought I'd be saying that in August, but please do help me get there. Just over 1,800 now, and as I said the other day, crossed 250,000 views. The support this summer has been absolutely off the scale, and I cannot believe it. And that's reflected by the sheer amount of responses I had to put out on social media, on Twitter or X, Blue Sky, and on my YouTube community posts, asking for your thoughts and predictions and hopes for the last few days of the transfer window, and I was inundated with responses, and I'll get through as many of them. I can't promise to share all of them because there were so many of your thoughts on what will happen between now and Monday's 7 PM deadline. But first of all, we'll just give a bit more of an update on the context, because there's only so much you can really say about the same 3 or 4 players, and there's no real point in talking about anything else until something really emerges, and I don't think it will now. I think it's too late to go and look for a mysterious European target that I've sort of implored, I guess, Newcastle to do for quite a while, but they've chosen to focus more on domestic targets and plug in and play players, sure things, lack of risk. It makes a lot of sense in so many different ways because of the way that Newcastle have needed to improve the squad. And I think what I will concede is that through the work that they've done with 3 domestic players and 1 player that they've chased for quite a long time in Malik Chow, is the profile of the squad is so much stronger. Now they've got real midfield depth, which may well be tested. There will be a slight update on the fitness of Joe Linton and Sandro Tonali as well. But out wide, you've got Alanga. I've spoken so much about the profile of the players and the fact that the defence, midfield, and out wide now look more capable of playing the same way and doing what Eddie Howe wants them to do, regardless of who's in there. And I think that's really important, because previously under Eddie Howe and the way that the recruitment has had to work, because they've gone so big on some players and then been left short with PSR, it's only really worked when Tonali's in midfield or Isak's up front or whatever. And now it does feel like the team, with the caveat of obviously Isak not being there and obviously costing Newcastle points, up until up front it really feels like Newcastle have depth and quality across the board, so it feels like they can play the same way regardless of who's in the team up to a certain point. Of course, up front is the only place that's not the case, but they are trying to rectify that in the final few days of the window. Will they sign 2 players, and will that allow Alexander Isak to go, or will it just be 1 and then Isak stays? He's also been named in the Sweden squad, and a couple of the responses, spoiler alert, did sort of mention that they thought that Isak would get a mysterious injury or an actual injury because he hasn't had a pre-season in international duty, so he wouldn't be able to play for Newcastle, or would continue to not play without officially downing tools the way he has done over the last few weeks. I don't know about that. Let's see how that plays out. But Newcastle do need the attacking depth to match the rest of the team. I think that's the point I'm trying to make, and it really does feel like that's got to change, because they can't go into the season without 1 striker, let alone 2 coming in. And as I say, just to reiterate, the plan since Benjamin Šeško rejected Newcastle and went to Manchester United, I think he had a very, very bad night last night at Grimsby. It was 10th on the list of penalty takers, and they went out. It was a very strange evening from a Manchester United perspective, and particularly for Šeško. It's not been a great start to his Manchester United career, and I'm sure your hearts are all bleeding for him. But since he made that choice, Newcastle have abandoned their initial plan to find an Isak replacement and then find a Wilson replacement of sufficient quality, so the hierarchy is the same. where you've got your main striker being Sesko in that case, or Ekitike before him, and then somebody like a Strand Larsen, like a Wissa, as the sort of second striker in the way that Isak and Wilson works. But with Isak's future still up in the air, are they considering the Moneyball situation? There was a comment from Johnny yesterday, said that can't happen. He's a big fan of Moneyball. He doesn't want that to happen. So I agree with that. I think Newcastle need a quality operator of the... I don't think you're ever going to get the level of Isak, but you can get somebody who's a very similar style and or a very similar ceiling at least. And Sesko, as much as he's struggling at Manchester United, has a very similar ceiling to the way Isak did. He's a different type of player. Ekitike has a very similar ceiling and is almost an identical player. That was proven by Sky Sports on Monday, as I alluded to in the previous video. So yeah, this does feel like it would be a bad move to replace Isak and Wilson as a collective and look to sign two players to accumulate the impact that Isak had. I think that's a bad thing, because that's not what Newcastle planned to do. And the great thing that Newcastle have done throughout piss rain since the takeover is that every signing they have made has been deeply thought out. Every signing they have made has been a cog in the machine, and that's what I was alluding to before. The profile of those players is what makes this summer so good, I think, overall, and it saved what was looking a pretty disastrous situation about 6 weeks ago. Now looks, if they get a striker in, and Isak then reintegrates properly, then you're in a really strong position to attack the season. I've said how sad that is with Isak doing all this at now, is it feels like he is costing Newcastle from pushing on to achieve more great things. It's not just that he's holding them hostage to get out of a relegation battle. This is really, really what's quite sad about the way Isak's gone on, is it's stopping Newcastle having big ambitions. They would have, I think, 6 points. They'd be up at the top of the league after 2 games, 2 very difficult games with Leeds, a newly promoted side. Another difficult game in the circumstances, going to Elland Road. But if you had 6 points and you had Isak up front, you'd be really confident of getting a win. As it is, without any strikers, Anthony Gordon suspended, will Asuda start up front? We'll talk about that all tomorrow, but it's just the point I'm trying to make. So with all the Isak stuff parked, and obviously there's a little bit of a change in the mood because these talks didn't go particularly well, and some people in the club are now apparently saying, according to the likes of Keith Downey, maybe it is time to sell him. But for me, you can't sell him, just for optics at the very least, for anything less than the terms that you've put in place. And also, you can't sell him if it makes you weaker. And I would argue, as much as I like Strand Larsen and Wissa individually, they are both Wilson replacements. And if you had 2 Wilson replacements as a Champions League team trying to get into the Champions League again, I think that's a big, big risk. Stylistically as well, we talked about that on the True Faith podcast. The style of Isak, the way that Isak has been built around effectively, the way he drops deep, dribbles forward, links with play, creates opportunities and finishes them. He's the all-round package in a certain way. And okay, you can't really... You can't replace him properly unless you're getting Ekitike, as I said. You can't replace him directly, but you need somebody who can do very similar things to that. And Strand Larsen and Wissa are both box strikers, and I think you need somebody who can do all-round stuff. And alright, Sesko doesn't do exactly that, but he's much more of an all-round striker than Wissa or Strand Larsen are, who just come alive in the box and they're very much physical. They're very, Wissa is very quick, Strand Larsen's very strong, but they're both box strikers, and I think you'd need that. I think if one of them came on alongside Isak, you've got a really good foil for each other. You've got a really good complement. You've got one who does the dribbling and does the creating and creates the space. Then you've got one physical player who can come in and either play alongside him or instead of him when Newcastle are drawing a game with 15 minutes to go and they need to get the ball into the box quickly and have someone get on the end of it. That's what Strand Larsen would bring, and I think that's really ideal for me, is why I think Strand Larsen is over Wissa. It should be the man that Newcastle go for with Isak up front. That's my thought. That's what I think. That's what I want to happen. Do I think it'll happen? At the moment, I still do. Yeah, I don't think Newcastle will sell Isak. I know there's been that change of noise around it since Monday, since the talks, but the bid still hasn't arrived from Liverpool. Will it arrive? Because are Newcastle going to give that encouragement? Again, encouragement doesn't mean ringing Liverpool up and saying, hey, you can bid now. It means basically making progress of their own. With Strand Larsen, Wolves are looking for a replacement. The super agent George Mendes is on that. It'll be interesting what happens with Strand Larsen over the next couple of days. And if that does change anything, if because of the noise around Isak, if that has softened Newcastle's stance. I think it hasn't at this stage, and I wouldn't be surprised if Strand Larsen comes in with Isak and maybe plays more games than we would like him to if Isak doesn't hit the ground running once he's back into the team, which I still think will happen. So that's my thought. I'm going to read out a few of yours as well. Paul Judkins says, I think Isak stays but gets a mysterious injury, as I sort of alluded to with Sweden, which will keep him out till January 26. Strand Larsen seems more likely of the two with Wissa to get, but I wish we would pull off a couple of wild cards out for half the price. None of these players will have resale value, and I fully understand that thought process, that feeling, because I've sort of talked about this, and even I said on the True Faith podcast about Strand Larsen yesterday. He is an example of what Newcastle should have been doing, scouring Europe for these options, because he joined Wolves for 25 million quid after scoring 14 goals on loan for a set fee that was agreed before. So he's actually proven himself to be a better striker than that price. And he's probably, I'd say, probably a £40 million striker now off the back of last season. But Newcastle should have been, there was an opportunity with the Wilson deal because he only scored one goal in the FA Cup. He's not like he only played 300 minutes. He's not like he had a massive impact that needs to be replaced in the way that Isak did. You could have taken a little bit of a risk and had an opportunity, and I've mentioned Van Gassond, who's gone to Villa, Calamiendo, who's gone to Nottingham Forest. There's two examples from Ligue 1. There's other players from different countries. I've spoken about so many this summer. You only need to go back and look at videos from May to now to understand that this is a drum that I've been beating for quite a while. So I really do understand and agree with what Paul was saying in that message. Rob says, sign Strand Larsen and Wissa, move Isak to Liverpool as soon as possible. We'd be better off. We really need another centre midfielder too. Again, I understand that thought process. I understand that there's a lot of feeling towards Isak. Stylistically is my worry. It's why I do disagree with Rob's assessment, but I do fully understand the sentiment there. And the midfielder thing's really interesting. Newcastle have been linked tentatively with a loan move for Kobbie Mainoo, which I really don't see happening at all in the next few days. And also Fratesi from Inter has been linked. I do think that Newcastle need another midfielder to build on Willock. I've written about this, I've said this, but I don't think it will happen. I think numbers wise, if Willock can get something back close to his form again, and this is where Ramsey is an upgrade because he brings the same sort of things to a higher level that Willock did and does to the midfield. I think it can work, but yeah, I do agree with the second point there about another midfielder being needed as well, but I just don't see it. Quite a few people got back in touch on YouTube as well. Holographic Sentient said, Larsen and Soloth please, Isak to rot in the reserves until we decide otherwise. And I've had this conversation with family members over the last few days. My dad actually said this to me, that he thinks that Newcastle should let Isak rot in the reserves, and I disagree, because not because of any loyalty to Isak or anything to do with that. I think it's more, if you keep Isak, you got to play him. If you don't need to keep him, you sell him for the highest possible money, because his value will dissipate. He won't be worth the money that he should be worth even in January if you don't play him for 3 months. It doesn't benefit anybody to do that. I've said that on both sides personally. If Isak reintegrates, he has to play. If he stays, he has to play. If he isn't going to do that, then you do have to consider selling him in the last few days. That's why I think Newcastle are looking at this whole thing. I don't know what the meeting was like on Monday, but if it was more along the lines of, I'm not going to, my position isn't changing, they do then have to consider the sale, because at the moment his official line is, he's not going to play for the club again. I think that will change. I think, as I say, it's important that that's not been mentioned since it emerged, but it's a dangerous game to be playing, and the gamble and everything is a little bit more high stakes this week because that meeting didn't go particularly well. Michael says, hi Harry, my gut says Isak will not be allowed to move similar to Kane in 2021. He will apologise to the squad and they'll welcome him back, and he'll have a slow start, but mid-autumn he'll be firing again. I'm torn about the situation, but overriding feeling is we must be strong, as no player is bigger than the massive club we are, although part of me wants him gone, but I can't see Liverpool offering what he's worth. And actually my bigger gripe is this whole situation is the pro-Liverpool media narrative and the cheek of Liverpool to unsettle him in the first place. I think that there's something in that, I don't want to really sort of jump in on that sort of anti-Liverpool thing, because that's not my job. That's not what I'm here to do. I want to be more calm and analytical about it. But that is a lot of fan sentiment. You have to look at it, and I think there is a sort of feeling that Liverpool haven't done this properly. I mean, why would you not bid more money than they have? There was a headline in one of the papers that said they were looking to clinch a £150 million deal after bidding 40 million less. That's not a position of negotiation as they claim it is, because you're not going to go up by 40 million pounds. If you set it out at 110, you may be looking at paying maximum 130. If there was an offer on the table of 130 plus, that would have been serious, because I do understand that you don't bid your first bid as what you will eventually pay. You do try and negotiate, but make the bid at least 130 in terms of unsettling the player. And it was called by, I think, Luke Edwards back in March or May or something. He said that there's going to be lots of talk about unsettling Isak, and that's definitely happened. The low balling has not helped. The fact that Liverpool are sitting back and watching this, if they'd just gone and made the serious play for Isak, really put Newcastle under pressure, they could have got him even against Newcastle's will, really, because of the pressure and the noise, which is already, as we've said, the little bit of it is really sort of impacting them in the way that it has done. Isak wasn't unsettled at the start of the pre-season when he was in Austria. Those clips of him being involved in the whitewater rafting, in the training in Austria, all of that, before this noise really came out, I think he did want to leave. I do believe that and I think Eddie Howe's kind of admitted it, Newcastle knew that he wanted to leave, and I do have questions about how they've acted as a result of that. But he wasn't unsettled to the point of doing this back in mid-July when he arrived. And I think this whole thing and the way he's acted is not really... He has to take responsibility for it, but Liverpool haven't matched that with their intent and their desire. He feels like an opportunistic signing to them, and that's what really frustrates me about it, is that if they really wanted him, they could have had him. But also them signing Ekitike has made it more difficult. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't have signed Ekitike, or they should have stepped aside, or they robbed him from Newcastle. It doesn't mean any of that. What it does mean is, though, it's made it directly more difficult, because he was Newcastle's ideal replacement, to sign Isak. If they really wanted Isak, there's no way they should have signed Ekitike to make that deal happen. So I do appreciate and agree with the sentiment. Apples says, I hope we get 2 strikers in and sell Isak. I believe we'll get one and keep him, and it'll get messy from there. I think there is that possibility that it does get messy, and I do again agree. I think that's what I do think will happen. I'm more optimistic that he will settle down. I think it's very easy for him to be this steadfast when the window's open and Liverpool are still interested and still active in the discussions. Yeah, I think this, for me, doesn't feel like he will do that, but if he does and it gets messy, then it won't be good. It won't be good. So I do understand, again, the sentiment that maybe Newcastle do look at this and think, well, for the sake of us, it would be good to sell him and maybe get these 2 strikers in. But there's only 4 days left of the window or something now. So is that even possible to do in that time? I'm not convinced it is. I think they'll get one of them. I think it'll be Strand Larsen, and then they'll keep Isak, and hopefully Isak. Because the thing is, it's easy to say all of this now. When the Champions League starts, obviously, there's the draw tonight. We'll be reacting to that tomorrow. When the Champions League starts, and he's got these big occasions, and you saw what St James's Park was like on Monday, that's not something you just want to avoid playing for. I know he doesn't want to, but everybody can be professional about this. Fans can get on board with him scoring goals, but not adoring him, not throwing their love behind him like they have before, and he can just get on with scoring goals until at least January, when eventually he may well go to Liverpool. But it feels now like Newcastle are in that stage where something has changed in the last couple of weeks within the club to suggest that maybe the deal should happen. But again, I will stress, it cannot happen on anything other than their terms. And I'll just go through a couple on Blue Sky as well. Juan says Strand Larsen will come in, Fratesi will come in, Isak will stay, reintroduced after international break, on bench for Bournemouth. That's his think, his want, his absolutely no idea. This has been too long and drawn out. I'm sapped of all emotion. Thanks for keeping it level. I appreciate that. Thanks, Juan. Razor has said, I think we overpay massively for Strand Larsen. Then, despite all the not for sale talk, the Newcastle board crumbles and we sell Isak to Liverpool for about 125 million. not only weakening the playing squad, but also making us look like idiots who can be bullied. And I think that is something that Newcastle need to avoid. It might happen, I don't know. As I say, there is a sort of rumbling that maybe Newcastle are looking at thinking it would just be better to cut our losses. A lot of fans are saying that too. But I think that that's important. I think it's important to not do that because it makes Newcastle look weak, and it also weakens the squad. I still believe, maybe it's something that very few people do, but I still believe that he will reintegrate properly. I still believe he'll score goals if he stays at Newcastle. This has happened before to similar levels with Suarez, with Isak, with Modric, and they've all come back and had great seasons. It's basically certain that he'll leave next summer, but I think it always was. This has ruined the emotion and the connection, but has it ruined the actual possibility of him playing and scoring for Newcastle? No, I don't think so. But I've rambled on for long enough. Hopefully that's given you a flavour of what I think and what you guys think as well. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you then. Cheers.